So many of you have come together to help us put this together. We want to invite Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Lily Eskelsen García, the president of the National Education Association, Jitu Brown, the national director for the Journey for Justice Alliance, and Derrick Johnson, the president and the CEO of the NAACP. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I will say I'm uniquely honored to be here because I'm here with Rehema, who has been studying this topic forever. Rehema knows more about this than I could ever hope to learn, so we are going to, in fitting fashion, kick this off with Rehema.
Thank you. Randi, I want to kick it off with you. I want to know, why is it that you thought that this was so important for us to do, and what is that role of public education in maintaining a strong democracy?
So, can you hear me?
We can.
So first, I just want to say and express my gratitude to the two of you, to MSNBC, to all the partners that are up there, not that I can read them because there's so many of them, to all of you, because nothing says that public education is important as having a forum like this where the press shows up, where candidates show up, because of what all of you do every single day. So, look, teaching, you know, and you said this before, Rehema, teachers have huge responsibility for the nation, but they don't have the respect and they don't have the resources. And at the end of the day, we live in a really complicated world, and lots of presidential candidates, not all of them, but lots of them say, I want to be the, education president, and they'll have great sound bites and great platitudes, but when it gets to, okay, how are you going to make every single public school a place where parents want to send their kids, where educators want to work, where kids thrive, where we're meeting kids' social, emotional, and academic needs, then you hear silence. And today is about not just the values of making education foundational to democracy, not about the values of making sure we deal with equity and excellence, but the hows. How are we going to do this? Instead of having, tests, how are we going to have community schools? How are we going to have welcoming and safe environments? How are we going to meet kids' diverse learning needs? How are we going to respect teachers? How are we going to give them the freedom to teach? How are we going to have neighborhood public schools have AP courses and robotics courses and the kind of things that we see in Scarsdale and other places? How are we going to strengthen our democracy and our economy by seizing the future of kids? That's what this is about, and I'm so appreciative and grateful that all of you, and those candidates decided that they would show up and listen to all of you. The future is about our communities. This audience represents our communities. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Randi. Lily, you and I had a chance to talk yesterday about, one of the questions is, this room is filled with people who are experts at this because they do it every day. The stage is filled with people who are experts on this. A president can be an expert on education, but they can also provide something that's more important than being an expert in education. They can provide the leadership necessary to do some of those things that Randi just talked about, to do some of the things you and I talked about. What is it that you want to ask these presidential candidates to do? What do you want to hear from them that they are going to do to fix all of the things that we're fairly familiar with need fixing?
So let me tell you, the basis for all of that has to be in the next president's mind, that the purpose of public education, was originally to be the foundation of that democracy, because it was the place where all kids could meet, regardless of their religion, regardless of their parents' social status. The public would pay for this public institution, and all kids would have what they need to succeed. But what we've forgotten is the purpose of the federal government. The purpose was never to be, God help us, your school board. The Secretary of Education wasn't supposed to be your superintendent. The purpose of the Department of Education on the federal level was to protect the rights of students against discrimination. It was developed in the 60s as part of the civil rights movement, that all kids should mean something. And in that time, all kids didn't include kids with disabilities. It didn't include that black kids got what white kids got, that little girls got what little boys got. And it expanded to the protection of immigrant students, poor students, LGBTQ students. All was supposed to mean all, and all students were supposed to have a champion in the federal government for their right to justice. I have known in my bones from the day I walked into my 6th grade class at Orchard Elementary. I know my purpose as a teacher. It is to open a child's mind to its infinite possibilities. My purpose has been corrupted by too many politicians who don't understand the purpose of our hearts. And that brings us to the purpose of this forum today, of everyone that's sitting in this audience, but also everybody that is listening online, everybody that's watching it on TV. Your purpose is to do your homework. This is the most high-stakes civic test of our lifetime, to decide who's for kids and who's just kidding, to look and say, who will understand what it is we're trying to achieve? Our students are counting on us, and we are not going to let them down.
Willie, thank you. Jitu, I want to know, teachers could be welcomed all across the country, but they decided to hold this forum here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Why is this a good place for this forum to be? And tell us what is happening here in Pittsburgh in terms of the quality of education for your students, those who are at the top, those who are struggling from the bottom, as well as your students who might have special needs to be addressed.
Well, first I want to echo Randy's sentiments and just say I'm grateful for you all to be a part of this forum and to help us illuminate this moment. It's really important. So I'm not from Pittsburgh, but I would do my very best to represent my folk that are here. I think the education justice movement lives here in Pittsburgh. You heard Angel Goldberg say earlier that when Teach for America was putting unqualified teachers in urban classrooms, communities organized and booted them out. When privatizers wanted to close schools instead of focusing on equity, parents, young people, educators came together and they stopped school closings. But they didn't just say what they were against. They came with a positive vision. They said, we want sustainable community schools. We want evidence-driven reforms in order to improve education for our children. And they have 9 now and more to come. They said, we want to stop the racist zero-tolerance policies that target black and brown children, right? And so they organized and they won a kindergarten or 2nd grade suspension ban. But I want the audience to think about, why should someone have to organize to stop someone from suspending 5- and 6-year-olds? And so that work that's done here in Pittsburgh is also done in New York. It's also done in Camden, New Jersey. It's also done in Chicago. It's also done in Detroit. The illusion that black, brown, indigenous families don't care about our children is also a weak excuse, a weak departure from the mandate of equity. You know, Lily talked about the fact that where did the Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act come from? That it emerged from the Civil Rights Movement. Well, we would say, on behalf of the Journey for Justice Alliance, we've had bipartisan failure of that mandate. And so our work today is to encourage Democratic presidential candidates to step up to the plate and to look at the fact that we don't have failing schools, but as a public, we've been failed. See, we represent that mother who's had to send their child to 3 schools in 5 years. We represent that 14-year-old who's treated like a criminal in a school instead of being embraced. We represent that teacher who's in a classroom with no technology, that young person that goes to a school where there are no robotics, there is no world language. That's not our fault. That's the fault of a system that intentionally provides one quality of education for one group of children, but denies that justice for another group of children. And so this moment is important because we all come from different places. I wasn't born on the same block as Lily or Randy, but for all the privatizers who try to say that community groups that stand with teachers, that we're teacher union hacks, I want to tell you, I'm from the south side of Chicago, all right? And I want to say this. I have a lot more in common with a teacher than a hedge funder. I have a lot more in common with Randi Weingarten than Eli Broad. And I think that we have to be very clear. So for members of the media who raise those questions, I would say, when will you start asking who's funding that side? When will you start asking that question? Because I'm clear that to the young people who tugged on my pants leg, to the second graders at Mollison Elementary School on the south side of Chicago, who tugged on my pants leg in the gym room and begged me, Mr. Jitu, will they reopen my school? Because they were displaced from a receiving school. That's who I represent. Those voices are the ones that I hear. So I think this moment is important because this is not about some type of moment that we're making up. People are fighting for justice all over the country. Right now in Oakland, California, parents are fighting to stop school closings. Right now in Little Rock, Arkansas, people are organizing in Little Rock, where 9 brave souls risked their lives. They orchestrated an unjust state takeover and took away people's right to vote, to elect their school boards in order to grease the rails for school privatization. That should not be acceptable, and it's not acceptable to us. So we're honored to be a part of this moment, and I think Pittsburgh is important because, again, it's where education justice movement lives, and we want to make sure that the voices of people in this audience are heard.
Thank you, Jitu. So, Derrick, one of the commonalities we've heard from the three that preceded you is the intersection of the right to a public education as a civil right, right? You are a leader in the civil rights movement, and what people are beginning to understand, and they've been understanding for decades, is that if you do not get access to or a proper public education that is well-funded and facilities that are safe and that provides you with the full range of things that other Americans get, that is a civil rights disadvantage, and we've got to think about it that way. We don't think about it just because of our children and the school they get. We think about it because we are a nation that believes everybody should be getting the same public facilities, and we are not. So what are you listening for today from the candidates? Because they're all going to say, we know they're going to say the right thing. We know we're going to say they're on the right side of things. But what are the nuances you're looking for to capture the essence of their understanding of education as a civil right?
Thank you. And thank you, Randy and Lily and Jitu, for pulling this forum together. The concept of civil rights came into being as a result of people being exploited for free and cheap labor. The foundation of the civil rights movement, starting from 1865 to forward, was based on the ability to collectively bargain, the ability to exercise your franchise, your right to vote, but the opportunity of receiving a quality education. That's the foundation of the civil rights movement. The NAACP, we filed through Charles Hamilton Houston and later Thurgood Marshall, the Brown versus Board of Education case, which was a consolidation of 5 cases, which was decided in 1954 that there was a violation. In 1955, this concept of all deliberate speed. That's a concept that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as being deliberate and speed. I normally say it's like taking an X-Lax with a sleeping pill. What you get is a mess. And what we have now is a mess because in many states across the country, it took up to 17 years to fully implement any remedy to Brown versus education, separate but equal. But as a result of that, we had to spend another 20 years fighting busing. Then as a result of that, we've been fighting another 15 years around quality education and privatization. And so now the real question I'm listening for is, what does it mean to support public education? It's like saying, I like to eat food. What's really there? For the NAACP, we fought public education systems because they have not treated black and brown children correctly. We fought charter schools because they have not treated black and brown children correctly. The real question is, how do we provide quality education for all children? Because the delivery system can be inequitable in both settings. And when we're looking at the next president, how are we going to make education a public policy priority? One in which we provide quality pay for quality teachers. My wife practiced bankruptcy law. The most disheartening thing is when a client comes in who's a teacher, she's in distress, or they could be in distress, and they cannot even get rid of the student loan. And as a result of not getting rid of the student loan, they're now in bankruptcy. Teaching is no longer a marketable degree. And because of that, children in Detroit, where I grew up, children in Jackson, Mississippi, where I live, we are suffering as a result. Canada, Finland, Japan, Cuba, all of those nations have made education a priority, and as a result of that, their economies are growing. They are educating young people for a prosperous future, but in the United States, we are going backwards because individuals are seeking to privatize public education or seeking to profit from public education in ways in which children are not in the center of the conversation, but the ancillary conversation is about individuals who are making money. So for the candidates, how are you going to make public education a priority? How are you going to put the children in the center of that? And how are we going to look for a future with education being the most important thing as opposed to a future where so many kids are being left out?